The rain had been falling since early morning, slow at first, and then heavier as the day went on. By the time evening approached, the sky was dark, even though the sun was still supposed to be there. Cars rushed by with their headlights on, water splashing up from the broken road. At a bus stop near a small market, a woman stood quietly, holding a thin bag close to her chest. Her clothes were wet, her hair stuck to her face, and her shoes were worn out at the sides. She did not look around much. She did not want to. People passed her as if she were part of the bus stop itself. Some looked for a second, then quickly looked away. A few adjusted their umbrellas and stepped farther from her, afraid of the rain or maybe afraid of her sadness. She tried to keep her face calm, but it was hard. Her eyes burned. Every few minutes a tear mixed with the rain and rolled down her cheek. Unnoticed by everyone except her, she had not planned to be there. Nobody ever planned such moments. Just a week ago, her days still had a shape. She woke up early, cleaned, cooked simple food, and tried to keep life moving forward. It was not an easy life, but it was hers. Now she was standing at a bus stop without knowing where she would sleep that night. The weight of that thought sat heavily in her chest. She looked at the road, hoping a bus would come, though she was not sure which one she needed. The small amount of money in her bag was not enough to travel far anyway. She kept counting it in her head again and again, as if the number might change if she tried hard enough. It did not. The rain grew stronger. Wind pushed water under the bus stop roof. Her hands started shaking from the cold. She wanted to sit, but the bench was wet and already taken by two teenagers who were laughing loudly. Scrolling on their phones, living in a world where the rain was just an inconvenience, not a symbol of everything falling apart. She turned her face slightly away from them, embarrassed by her tears. She did not want anyone to ask questions. Questions hurt more than silence. Questions meant explaining, and explaining meant opening wounds she was barely holding together. Across the road, a man had just finished a long day of work. His shoulders were stiff, his shoes muddy, and his mind full of small worries. Bills to pay, a leaking tap at home, a phone call he had been avoiding. He pulled his jacket tighter as he walked, thinking only about getting home and eating something warm. As he crossed the street, he noticed the bus stop. At first, nothing stood out. Then he saw her. Something about the way she stood still, small, like she was trying to disappear, made him slow his step. He told himself not to stare. He told himself to keep walking. Everyone had problems. He was not responsible for fixing the world. He took a few more steps, then stopped. He was not sure why. Maybe it was the way her hands trembled. Maybe it was the way her eyes kept dropping to the ground, like she was ashamed of existing. Or maybe it was because he remembered a time years ago when he had stood in the rain with nowhere to go and no one to call. He stayed where he was. Rain soaking into his jacket, arguing with his own thoughts. If he went back, he might get involved. If he got involved, things could get complicated. People usually were. He sighed quietly, looking up at the gray sky. At the bus stop, the woman closed her eyes for a moment. Images ran through her mind, faces that once promised safety, words that once sounded true. She had trusted those words. Trust had cost her more than money. It had cost her sleep, peace, and now even shelter. She opened her eyes again, blinking away fresh tears. She told herself she had to stay strong. She had survived worse days. Or at least, she had told herself that before. But today felt different. Today, the tiredness went deeper than her body. It sat in her bones. A bus drove past without stopping, too full already. Water sprayed onto the footpath, splashing her legs. She flinched but said nothing. Complaining would not change anything. Behind her, someone muttered something rude about people crowding the shelter. She pretended not to hear. Growing invisible had become a skill. Across the road, the man finally turned back. He did not feel brave. He felt nervous and unsure. His steps were slow, hesitant, like each one needed permission. He reached into his pocket, feeling the little money he had left after the day's expenses. It was not much. Certainly not enough to fix someone's life, still. His feet carried him closer. He stopped a few steps away from her, careful not to startle her. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes and the way her jaw tightened, like she was holding herself together piece by piece. He cleared his throat softly. His voice almost disappeared into the sound of the rain. "Are you okay?" The question hung in the air, fragile and simple. She looked at him, surprised, like someone waking from a bad dream. For a second, fear crossed her face. Then suspicion. Kindness often came with conditions, and she had learned that lesson the hard way. She did not answer right away. Her fingers tightened on her bag. She searched his face for something dangerous and found only tired concern. "I'm fine," she said at last. The words came automatically, even though they were not true. He nodded, as if he expected that answer. People always said they were fine, even when they were clearly not. He did not push. He simply stayed there, rain dripping from his hair, sharing the space. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Cars passed. Someone laughed somewhere behind them. Life continued, uncaring. He glanced at the wet ground, then back at her. "It's getting colder," he said gently. "The rain doesn't seem like it's stopping anytime soon." She swallowed. "I know." There was something in her voice then, a crack that words could not hide. He took a breath. He knew this was the point where most people walked away. He had done it himself many times. It was easier, safer, but instead he did not leave. "I've got an extra jacket," he said, taking it off before she could refuse. He held it out, not too close, not forcing it on her. "You can give it back later." Her eyes widened slightly. "I can't. It's okay," he said quickly. "Really?" She hesitated, pride fighting survival. In the end, the cold one. She reached out slowly as if the jacket might disappear if she moved too fast. When she took it, her hands brushed his, and she flinched out of habit, then relaxed. "Thank you," she said softly. He gave a small nod. No big smile. No comments. Just a quiet moment shared between strangers. For the first time all day, the tight feeling in her chest loosened a little. The rain continued to fall. But now there were two people standing under it, and somehow that made it feel slightly less heavy. Neither of them knew yet that this small moment, this pause in a busy, uncaring day, was the beginning of something that would change both their lives in ways they could not imagine. The rain did not stop that night. It followed them as they walked slowly away from the bus stop, the streetlights casting long, shaky reflections on the wet road. The woman kept a jacket wrapped tightly around herself. It still felt strange, wearing something that belonged to someone else. Something offered with no demand. They did not walk close. There was space between them, careful and respectful. She did not yet trust the silence, and he did not want to push words where they were not welcome. After a few minutes, he glanced at a small tea shop near the corner, its lights glowing warm against the dark street. "We can warm up there for a bit," he said. "If you want." She hesitated again. Every decision felt heavy now. Saying yes meant accepting more help. Saying no meant stepping back into the cold. Finally, she nodded. Inside, the air smelled of tea and wet clothes. A few people sat quietly, staring into cups, lost in their own thoughts. Nobody paid them much attention. That made it easier. They sat at a small table near the wall. He ordered 2 cups without asking, then looked at her, unsure. "Is that okay?" She managed a small smile. "Yes." When the tea arrived, she wrapped her hands around the warm glass immediately. The heat made her shoulders drop without her realizing it. For a few seconds, she just breathed. He watched quietly, pretending to focus on his own cup. He knew that look. It was the look of someone who had been holding too much for too long. Minutes passed. The rain tapped against the window. She was the first to speak. "I didn't think anyone would stop," she said, her voice low. "Most people don't." He nodded. "I almost didn't." She looked at him then, really looked at him. There was honesty in his face, not pride. They fell quiet again, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt like space. Slowly, she began to talk, not all at once, not in neat sentences. Pieces came out uneven and broken. She spoke about how everything had started to slip without her noticing, about trusting someone who promised stability, about believing that hard work and patience would be enough. She talked about the night she had to leave her place, carrying only what fit into one bag, about standing outside, staring at a door that would not open again, about how loud the night felt when you had nowhere to go. He listened without interrupting, without rushing her. Sometimes he nodded. Sometimes he simply stayed still, letting her words settle. When she stopped, embarrassed by how much she had said, he didn't react the way she feared. There was no judgment in his eyes. No advice meant to sound smart. That's a lot for one person, he said simply. Something inside her broke open at those words. Her eyes filled again, but this time she didn't turn away. She let the tears fall quietly into the steam rising from her tea. Outside, the rain softened, but didn't stop. He told her a little about himself, too. Not as a comparison, just enough to let her know he understood struggle in his own way. About working since he was young, about days when money ran out before the month did, about how easy it was to feel invisible, even when surrounded by people. I used to think asking for help meant failing, he said. Turns out refusing help can be its own kind of failure, too. She listened carefully, holding on to every word. After a while, the shop owner glanced at the clock. He noticed, stood up, and paid. Outside, the air was colder now. The rain had slowed to a thin drizzle. She hugged the jacket again. I don't know where I'll go, she admitted. Saying it out loud made it more real. He thought for a moment. There's a small shelter a few streets away, he said. It's not perfect, but it's safe. I can walk you there. Her first response was fear. Shelters carried stories. Some good, many bad. But the way he said safe made her listen. They walked together, slower this time. Streetlights flickered. Night sounds filled the spaces between buildings as they walked. She noticed small things about him, the way he slowed his step to match hers, the way he checked the road before crossing, the way he kept a respectful distance. These details mattered more than big promises. When they reached the shelter, the building looked tired but welcoming. A light was on inside. She stopped at the door. Her hands shook again, but not from the cold this time. He didn't rush her. I'll wait here, he said. Just in case. She went inside. The smell of disinfectant and old furniture greeted her. A staff member spoke kindly, asked simple questions, offered a blanket for the first time that day. She sat down without feeling rushed. A few minutes later, she came back out. He was still there, hands in his pockets, looking up at the sky. They said I can stay tonight, she said. Relief and fear mixed together. He smiled softly. Good. She held out the jacket. Here, you can keep it, he said. Just bring it back tomorrow if you want. She nodded, throat tight. I'd like that. They stood there awkwardly, unsure how to end something that had started by accident. Thank you, she said again, meaning more than words could explain. He hesitated, then spoke. You're stronger than you think. Today doesn't define you. She watched him walk away, his figure slowly fading into the night. Inside, wrapped in an unfamiliar blanket, she stared at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, her thoughts were not racing in panic. They were tired, but calmer. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She only knew that one stranger had stopped, that had changed the shape of the night. Somewhere across town, the man unlocked his door and sat down in silence. He replayed the evening in his mind, wondering why it had affected him so deeply. He realized something uncomfortable and important at the same time. Doing nothing would have been easier, but walking away would have stayed with him much longer. The rain finally stopped. Both of them slept that night under different roofs, carrying the same quiet thoughts sometimes. The smallest moments carry the greatest weight. Morning came slowly, like it was unsure whether it was welcome. Light slipped through the small window of the shelter room and landed on the woman's face. She opened her eyes and for a moment didn't know where she was. The ceiling was unfamiliar. The bed beneath her was too narrow. Then memory rushed back, and her chest tightened before easing again. She was safe. At least for today. She sat up quietly, careful not to disturb the others sleeping nearby. The blanket slid down her arms, and she noticed the jacket folded neatly at the edge of the bed. For a few seconds, she just looked at it. The smell of rain and outside air still clung to it. It reminded her that last night was real. Someone had seen her. Someone had stopped. She stood, washed her face at the shared sink, and stared at her reflection. She looked tired, older than she felt, but there was something else there too. Not hope exactly. Something smaller. A pause. A break in the fear. Breakfast was simple. Bread, tea, quiet voices. Nobody asked too many questions. She was grateful for that. After eating, she stepped outside. The rain had washed the streets clean. The air smelled fresh, almost innocent. It felt strange that the world could look this calm after such a night. She checked the time on the old phone she carried, then tightened her grip on the jacket. She had promised to return it. More than that, she wanted to. It felt important. Across town, the man was already awake. Sleep hadn't come easily. He kept replaying everything in his mind, wondering if he had done enough or too much. He made coffee that tasted weak, sat at his small table, and stared at the wall. When he finally picked up the jacket he usually wore, he stopped. He remembered it wasn't there. A strange feeling filled his chest. It wasn't regret. It was something quieter. Like responsibility, but lighter. He left his place and walked toward the street near the shelter, not fully sure why. He told himself it was just his normal route. He told himself many things. When he saw her standing outside holding the jacket and scanning the street, he slowed down. She hadn't noticed him yet. She looked different in daylight. Still tired, still careful, but standing straighter. He walked closer. "Good morning," he said. She turned. For a second, she looked startled, then relief softened her face. "Good morning. I was hoping I'd run into you," she admitted, holding out the jacket. "Thank you again. Did you sleep?" he asked, ignoring the jacket for a moment. "A little," she said. "Better than I expected." He took the jacket back, folding it over his arm. "That's good." They stood there, unsure what came next. Daytime felt different. More exposed. "I should start looking for work again," she said, "or somewhere longer term." "I can't stay there forever," he nodded. "There's a place nearby that helps with that. Not miracle stuff. Just paperwork, chances." She considered it. A week ago, she would have said no out of pride. Today, pride felt less important than progress. "Would you show me?" she asked. He did. The building was simple. Worn walls, posters peeling at the corners, but people inside were moving with purpose. A woman at the desk smiled and handed her forms without judgment. She sat, pen in hand, and felt something twist inside her. It had been a long time since she filled out a form with hope rather than fear. The man waited nearby, tending to read a notice on the wall. He didn't rush her. He didn't hover. Later, they walked outside again. The sun had broken through clouds, lighting puddles on the road. "Thank you for staying," she said quietly. "I didn't do much," he replied. "You did," she said. "You stayed." He didn't argue. Days passed. They did not suddenly become inseparable. Life didn't change overnight. But their paths crossed again and again. Sometimes by plan, sometimes by chance. He checked in. She updated him. She found part-time work cleaning in the mornings. It paid little, but it was honest. Each small step made her stronger. There were setbacks. Days when jobs didn't call back. Nights when fear returned quietly. On those days, she almost stopped believing again. But then she remembered the rain. The bus stop. One question spoken softly. She started saving small amounts. She laughed less guardedly. She learned which doors were still closed and which ones only needed a push. He watched all this from a careful distance. Proud, but not claiming credit. Helping didn't mean owning someone's story. One evening, he sat on a low wall near the market watching people pass. "Why did you stop?" she asked suddenly. That night, he thought for a long time. "Because I knew what it felt like to be ignored," he said. "And because walking away would have felt worse than helping." She nodded. You changed something, she said. Not everything. Just enough. Weeks later, she found herself holding keys in her hand. A small room. Bare walls. A door that closed and opened because she decided so. She stood inside and laughed quietly, then cried, then laughed again. That night, she sent him a short message. Just one line. He read it 3 times. He realized then that some kindnesses don't end. They echo. Life went on. It always did. But neither of them was the same anymore. The rain had passed. The tears had dried, and both of them knew now that stepping in, even once, could change the direction of a life. Life did not suddenly become easy. If anything, part of her realized how fragile progress could be. The small room she now lived in was quiet, sometimes too quiet. At night, every sound felt louder. Pipes knocking. Distant traffic. Her own thoughts. Still it was hers. She woke early each morning, often before sunrise. She cleaned houses, offices, sometimes stairwells that smelled of old paint and dust. The work was tiring, but it gave her structure. Structure mattered. It reminded her that days could move forward instead of circling the same pain. Some mornings were harder than others. There were days when her body ached, and her hands felt numb from cleaning supplies in cold water. On those days, doubt returned quietly. Was this really enough? Would one small mistake send everything crashing down again? She learned to keep going anyway. Every evening, she counted her savings carefully, like it was something fragile that could break if handled roughly. The pile grew slowly, very slowly, but it grew. Occasionally the man checked in. Not constantly. Just enough. A short message. A quick question asked gently. He never hovered, never made her feel watched. That mattered more than grand gestures. One evening, she sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at a message she had typed and erased many times. Finally, she sent it. Still okay? He replied a few minutes later. Yes, she wrote. Then, after a pause, some days are heavy, but I'm standing. It's more than enough, came the answer. Those words stayed with her. Meanwhile, his own life continued quietly. Work, responsibilities, routine. But something had shifted in him too. He noticed things more. People waiting too long at crossings. Faces that held silent stories. He didn't act on every moment. He couldn't, but he noticed. Helping once had opened a door he hadn't known existed. Weeks passed. One afternoon, she received a call about a better job. It wasn't perfect, but it paid more and offered steady hours. She thanked the person twice before hanging up. Her hands shook as she did. She sat still for a long time, letting the news settle. Then fear arrived. What if she couldn't keep up? What if they saw through her? What if losing this chance hurt worse than never having it at all? That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she met the man near the same market where their paths had crossed before. The sun was bright this time. No rain, I'm scared, she admitted suddenly, surprising herself with the honesty. He didn't dismiss it. That makes sense, he said. New ground always feels unstable. What if I fail? She asked. Then you adjust, he replied. Failing isn't falling back. It's learning where the edge is, she breathed out slowly. You're good at saying things like that, he smiled faintly. Only because I've needed to hear them myself. She took the job. The first weeks were exhausting. New routines. New faces. Expectations she worried she couldn't meet. Some days she came home and sat on the floor, too tired to even remove her shoes. But she showed up every morning. Slowly, confidence returned in small pieces. A supervisor nodded in approval. A thank you spoken without rush. Trust, built inch by inch. She bought a second chair for her room. Then a small plant. Then curtains that let light in without exposing everything. These were small victories. But they were hers. One evening, she invited the man for tea. She warned him not to expect much. This place matters, he said when he arrived, looking around the modest room. She laughed quietly. It's not much. It's everything, he corrected. They sat, sipping tea, sharing silence comfortably. I don't think I ever said this enough, she said. You didn't rescue me? You reminded me I could rescue myself. He lowered his eyes. You did the hard part, he said. Time continued its steady march. She began helping others at work whenever she could, explaining things patiently, offering extra kindness where she once wished for it herself. One rainy afternoon, not like before, but close, she noticed a woman standing under a broken awning, clearly struggling. For a moment, fear stopped her. Old memories rose. Then she remembered how it felt when someone chose not to walk away. She stepped closer, asked one small question, offered one small help. As she walked away later, something inside her healed a little more. That night, she told the man what she had done. I think kindness travels, she said. He smiled. It does. Quietly. Life didn't stop testing her. Bills increased. Work days stretched long. But she no longer saw herself as someone waiting to fall. She was building, and somewhere deep inside, she knew the hardest part was already behind her, because once you learn that one moment of care can change the direction of a life, you never walk the same way again. Time moved forward the way it always does, quietly and without asking permission. Weeks turned into months. Seasons shifted. The city changed its colors, but the memories of that rainy evening never fully faded. They simply settled into something softer, something easier to carry. Her life had found a rhythm. Wake early. Work steady hours. Return to a room that now felt like a home instead of a temporary stop. The plant on the windowsill had grown leaves. The curtains no longer smelled new. The silence at night no longer frightened her. She still had difficult days. Everyone did. But now, difficulty did not feel like the end of everything. It felt like a moment that would pass. One afternoon, as she walked past the old bus stop near the market, she slowed without realizing it. The roof was still damaged, the bench still uneven. Cars still rushed by without caring who stood waiting. She stood there for a while, letting memories wash over her. The cold, the rain, the weight of not knowing where night would lead. She closed her eyes briefly, then she smiled. Not because the memory didn't hurt, because it no longer controlled her. Later that day, she met the man for tea. They didn't meet often anymore, not because something was wrong, but because life had stopped feeling urgent. Crisis no longer held them together. Choice did. You look lighter, he said as they sat. I feel lighter, she replied. Not because everything is perfect, just because I know I can handle what comes. He nodded. That's a good place to be. They talked about small things. Work, the weather, ordinary life. The kind of conversation that once felt impossible. As they left the tea shop, clouds gathered unexpectedly. A few drops of rain hit the pavement. She laughed softly. Of course. He smiled too. Seems fitting. They stood under the awning together, not hiding from the rain. Just waiting for it to pass. You know, she said after a moment, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped. He didn't answer right away. Sometimes I wonder what kind of person I would still be if I hadn't. The rain slowed quickly as if it were only there to remind them that evening. She walked home alone, keys in her hand, step steady. Inside, she made tea and sat by the window, watching city lights blink on one by one. Her phone buzzed with a message from work. A small promotion. A little more responsibility. A little more trust. She let out a slow breath, feeling something warm fill her chest. Later that week, she volunteered at a local center on weekends. Nothing dramatic. Helping organize clothes, listening more than speaking. She recognized the looks in people's eyes. The same fear, the same exhaustion. She never said too much. Just enough. One day, a young man thanked her for listening. You didn't make me feel small, he said. Those words stayed with her the rest of the day. Across town, the man continued his routines. Work, home, walks through familiar streets. But he carried himself differently now. He trusted his instincts more. When something felt important, he paid attention. He never thought of himself as someone who changed lives. That idea felt too big, too dramatic, but he had learned something simple and true. Being present mattered. On a quiet evening, he passed the same bus stop again. Someone else stood there now. Different face, different story. He didn't stop this time. And that was okay. Kindness didn't mean sacrificing your whole life. It meant listening when the moment truly called. Months later, on a clear afternoon, their paths crossed one last time by chance. Not planned. Not necessary. They stood for a minute, exchanging updates. "I think I'm doing okay," she said. He nodded. "I knew you would." They didn't promise to meet again. They didn't need to. As she walked away, she felt no sadness. Only gratitude. The rain no longer symbolized loss. It had become proof of survival. And somewhere in the noise of the city, two lives continued forward, quietly changed by one ordinary decision made on an ordinary, rainy day. Not every story needs a grand ending. Some stories end with people standing stronger than before, and sometimes that is more than enough. Years have a gentle way of smoothing sharp memories. They don't erase them. They soften the edges so they no longer cut every time you touch them. Life kept moving forward for her. Work grew steadier. Responsibilities increased. The small room eventually became too small, not because she needed more space, but because she had outgrown the version of herself who first lived there. She moved to a slightly better place, still modest, but brighter. Windows that caught the morning sun. A kitchen where she could cook without balancing. Things on a single shelf. She never forgot where she started. There were mornings when she rushed out the door, keys in hand, coffee cooling beside her. There were evenings when she came home tired, shoes kicked off, body heavy, but mind calm. This kind of tiredness felt earned. Honest sometimes. While standing at the sink or folding clothes, she would pause and think about that night in the rain, not with sadness. With respect. That moment had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She learned something important over time. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in small, quiet ways. In routine. In trust. In not panicking when things go wrong. One afternoon at work, a new employee joined her team. The woman looked nervous, hands fidgeting, eyes scanning the room, like she expected the ground to disappear under her feet. She recognized that look instantly, without making a big deal of it. She helped her settle in, explained tasks slowly, made space for questions. At lunch, she listened more than she spoke. Later, the woman said, "You make this place feel less scary." She smiled and replied, "Someone once did that for me." She didn't explain more. She didn't need to. Across the city, the man's life also unfolded naturally. He never sought recognition or praise. He didn't tell the story of that rainy night to impress anyone. Most people never heard it, but he noticed how often people rushed past one another, how small moments were missed because everyone was busy protecting themselves. Sometimes he helped. Sometimes he didn't. And sometimes, helping meant nothing more than letting someone speak without interrupting. He grew older in a peaceful way, not without struggle, but without bitterness. On a quiet weekend, he volunteered to help repaint a community center. As he worked alongside others, laughing at paint splatters and uneven lines, he realized something. You don't need to change the whole world, just the part that's in front of you. Life circled them closer again without effort. One evening, they met unexpectedly at a small ceremony organized by the same center where she volunteered. He recognized her first, but waited, unsure if she'd remember him. The same way she did, their greeting was simple, comfortable, two people who shared a chapter. Not a dependency. "You're doing well," he said. "So are you," she replied, and she meant it. They spoke briefly, shared updates, smiled at the easy familiarity. Neither of them clung to the moment. There was no need. Some connections don't require constant attention to remain real. Later that night, walking home alone, she thought about how different her life might have been if she had lost faith entirely that night in the rain. If she had closed herself off. If she had chosen silence over survival, she unlocked her door and stepped into warmth. The city outside continued its noise. Horns, voices, movement, inside. Peace. She sat by the window and watched light rain begin to fall again, gentle this time. The kind of rain that nourishes instead of destroying. She smiled. Because now she knew something she hadn't back then. Rain doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes it means growth. Sometimes it brings strangers into your life, not to stay forever, but to help redirect you back to yourself. And sometimes, all it takes to change the course of a life is one ordinary person choosing not to walk away. The world moved on. So did they, quietly stronger, quietly kinder, and ready. When the moment came again to step in for someone else, life has a way of testing lessons long after you think you've learned them. Just when things feel steady, it asks a quiet question. Will you live the way you once needed someone else to live? For her, that question arrived on an ordinary day. It was late afternoon, and the sky looked unsure of itself. Not quite clear, not yet heavy with rain. She left work later than planned, shoulders tired, mind already thinking of home. She took a longer route, one she didn't usually walk. Passing streets filled with small shops and old buildings that seemed to remember more than they showed, near a closed storefront. She noticed a figure sitting on the ground. A young woman, knees pulled close, arms wrapped tight around herself. A thin sweater, no jacket. Eyes fixed on the pavement like looking up might hurt. Her steps slowed. She felt it immediately. That familiar pull. That quiet knot in the chest that said, "Pay attention." She told herself it might be nothing. People sat outside all the time. People had bad days. She wasn't responsible for everyone, but memory doesn't argue politely. She took a few steps past and stopped. The sound of traffic filled the space between them. The young woman shifted slightly, wiping her face with her sleeve. Thinking no one saw, she turned back. "Hey," she said gently, keeping her distance. "Are you okay?" The young woman looked up, startled. The same mix of fear and suspicion that once lived on her own face. "I'm fine," came the automatic answer. She nodded slowly, recognizing it. "I know, I used to say that too." Silence stretched, then cracked. "I don't know what to do," the young woman whispered. Those words landed heavy and familiar. She sat down nearby, not too close. Close enough to be present. "You don't have to know right now." The young woman took a shaky breath. Everything just fell apart. She listened. Didn't rush. Didn't interrupt. She had learned that listening could be an act of rescue all on its own. Eventually, she offered a warm drink from the nearby shop. Then, directions. Then, options. Nothing forced. Nothing rushed. When they stood to leave, the sky finally opened. A light rain. Gentle but steady. She smiled softly at the timing. Later that evening, she walked home slower than usual, rain tapping against her umbrella. She felt tired, but in a good way. The kind of tired that comes from giving, not from being drained. At home, she made tea and sat by the window. Watching the rain blur the streetlights, she thought about the man again, not with longing. With understanding, she finally understood what it must have cost him to stop that night. Not money, attention, emotional risk. The willingness to care when it would have been easier not to. Across the city, the man lived a quieter life now. Slower mornings. Careful steps on stairs. But his eyes were sharp, still watching the world with calm awareness. That same evening, he noticed a neighbor struggling with heavy bags near the door. He helped without thinking. No story, no symbolism. Just presence. They exchanged a few words. Then went back to their lives. Kindness didn't always announce itself. Weeks went by. The young woman she had helped sent a message one afternoon. Just 2 words. "Thank you." She stared at the screen for a long moment, then replied, "You're not alone." She didn't know where that young woman's life would go. That wasn't the point. The point was this. When someone stands in the rain long enough, any umbrella matters. One weekend, the city held a small community gathering. Nothing fancy. Music, shared food, folding chairs and uneven ground. She almost didn't go. Then she did. As she stood near the edge of the crowd, she noticed the man across the space. He saw her too. They smiled. Later, they spoke briefly. Not about the past. Not about gratitude. About life as it was now. Strange how one night can quietly shape everything, she said. He nodded. Only if you let it. They didn't stay long. They didn't need to. As she walked home under a clear sky, she realized something important. Her story was no longer about being helped. It was about becoming someone who helps without. Losing herself, the rain would come again. It always did. But now she knew how to stand in it. And, if needed, she knew how to step in. Life didn't change because of one big moment. It changed because of one small choice, made again, and again, and again. That was the real story, and it was still being written.